Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. At NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Maryland, there is a painting showing Tipu Sultan's army fighting the British with rockets. It comes as a surprise to many people that the American national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, was inspired by the rockets invented by a Muslim king, Tipu Sultan of Mysore, India. I am Professor Nazir Ahmed, scientist, NASA projects, currently serving as director of the American Institute of Islamic History and Culture, based in California. I was one of the principal scientists on the NASA Hubble Space Telescope, and I was a group leader on the Apollo project way back in 1964. The American Institute has been engaged since 1999 in highlighting the contributions of Islamic civilization in a global context. Our website, historyofislam.com, has had more than 3 million hits from all corners of the globe since its inception. The Institute is starting this series to highlight, showcase, articulate, project, and preserve the Islamic culture of South Asia. It is a long-term global effort that is supported by scholars from around the world. South Asia includes the vast region bounded by the Indian Ocean to the south, the Himalayas to the north, the Iranian desert to the west, and the jungles of Myanmar to the east. Today, it embraces the nation states of Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. Islam entered this region some 1400 years ago through trading routes in Kerala, which is in southwestern India. It spread through the dedicated efforts of awliya from Mazar-e-Sharif, that's in Afghanistan, Multan and Lahore, they're in Pakistan, Delhi and Ajmer in India, Sylhet in Bangladesh, and the Deccan in southern India. In its wake, it has left its impact on every aspect of life: language, art, architecture, handicrafts, philosophy, religion, clothes, and even cuisine. Indeed, the richness of this culture is second to none in the world. Which other culture can boast of the Taj Mahal of Agra, the Red Fort of Delhi, the Badshahi Mosque of Lahore, the Ghorid Minaret of Jam in Afghanistan, the Chini Masjid of Saidpur in Bangladesh, the Red Mosque of Sri Lanka, the Gol Gumbaz of the Deccan, the eloquence of Allama Iqbal, or the universal appeal of Mirza Ghalib, the master poet of the Urdu language. There are clouds hovering over the legacy of this rich Islamic culture. Extreme political movements look at the rich mosaic of South Asian culture through a binary lens of Hindu versus Muslim, and that's not right. It would be a sad day indeed if the extreme right forces succeed in hiding or destroying the legacy of the rich South Asian Islamic culture, humankind will be the poorer for it. Our first event focuses on the life and times of Tipu Sultan of Mysore, an extraordinary man who lived in extraordinary times and left his trail like a meteor shooting across the skyline of global history. We plan to follow it up with a series of broadcasts on historical figures, kings, saints, writers, poets, monuments, literature, and culture of South Asian Islam in the months to come. Now, a few words about Tipu Sultan. The 18th century was one of profound intellectual and political transformations. It was the age of Voltaire and Rousseau in France. Riding high on the scientific discoveries of Sir Isaac Newton, Europe entered the age of enlightenment. Old ideas and old institutions were challenged, and new ones were advanced to replace them. It was the age of revolution. The American Revolution of 1776 to 82 threw off the English rule in North America, and a new and mighty nation, the United States of America, was born. The French Revolution of 1789 to 91 challenged the monarchies of the world, and Europe resonated with cries of liberty, equality, fraternity. It was the beginning of the age of merchants and the end of the age of absolute monarchs. Companies such as the British East India Company made their appearance on the world scene and were the forerunners of the age of colonialism. It was the age of Jefferson and George Washington, of Louis XVI and Napoleon Bonaparte. And yes, it was the age of Tipu Sultan, whose path crossed the path of the major historical figures of his era. The India of Tipu Sultan was in an advanced stage of implosion. The Mughal Empire collapsed from within under its own weight, and its place taken up by local Nawabs and Rajas. The internal rivalries between local rulers gave an opportunity to the European powers to play off one against the other and advance their own political interests. In 1739, Delhi was sacked by Nadir Shah. The Marathas raided far and wide, Bengal in 1742, Jaipur in 1746, Delhi in 1750, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu as late as 1791, causing widespread death and destruction. According to contemporary Dutch sources, the Maratha raids killed 40,000 people in Bengal alone and destroyed its economy. A weakened Bengal fell to the plots of the British at the Battle of Plassey in 1757. To characterize these raids as Hindu versus Muslim is a travesty of historical truth. It should not be done. These were raids conducted for gold and loot. Into this world was born Tipu Sultan, son of Hyder Ali, in 1750. in a village near the modern city of Bangalore. Hyder Ali had risen as an army officer in the service of the Raja of Mysore until 1760, when he became the de facto ruler of the state. Consolidation of Mysore territories clashed with the expansionist designs of East India Company and the self-interest of the Nizam of Hyderabad and the Marathas. A series of wars ensued called the Anglo-Mysore Wars, four of them between 1768 and 1799. The sword of Tipu Sultan held off the British Empire for 40 years, until the Sultan fell in battle in 1799. Had history been more kind to the Sultan, he would have been hailed as the George Washington of India, the heralder of a new age of science, technology, political enlightenment, and economic development in Asia.
Hi all, this is Amin Ahmad from Canada. The title of my presentation is How Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan Inspired America's Fight for Freedom. I'm going to speak on how these two warrior kings from South Asia awed America's founding fathers, their fellow revolutionaries, as well as ordinary Americans during the country's formative years. Let's begin with how American revolutionaries celebrated the victories of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, including the Battle of Pollilore. The Second Continental Congress of USA, represented by 13 British colonies in North America, declared independence from Great Britain on 4th July 1776. As Britain tried to subjugate the fledgling country, Americans looked up to Britain's enemies to draw inspiration in their own struggle. Thus, the Americans took a very keen interest in Britain's conflicts with Mysore Kingdom, many thousand miles away. And the Americans readily found support from France, which was keen to get back at Britain for their, for its defeat in the 7 years war of 1754 to 63. Now, many other European powers allied with either English or French in what turned out to be a global, it turned out to be a conflict that was fought across each other's colonies, spanning much of the globe. In 1780, in far-away Mysore Kingdom, the East India Company was suffering one of its worst reverses in its military history. This was at the hands of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, who were supported by the French. Now, the humiliation which Tipu gave to the British at the Battle of Pollilore in September 1780 reverberated throughout America, where the news was received on August 23rd, 1781. On October 19th, 1781, the British land force led by Charles Cornwallis surrendered to the Americans led by George Washington. And 9 days later, Washington's victory, along with those of Mysore Kingdom under Hyder Ali's rule, was celebrated at the Presbyterian Church in Trenton, New Jersey. In the afternoon that day, the gathering drank 13 toasts, accompanied with a discharge of artillery, and one of which was for, quote, the great and heroic Hyder Ali. Let's move on to another interesting fact: how Hyder Ali's name was invoked to recruit US Navy's earliest known sailors, and how a ship named after him gave USA one of its greatest naval victory. Despite Washington's victory in October 1781, America was far from being an independent nation. The British still ruled the seas. In 1782, the state of Pennsylvania purchased Hyder Ali, a single-mast ship, and equipped it with cannons to help protect American vessels. Now, Hyder Ali is an anglicized version of Hyder Ali. The names Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, or Hyder Ali and Tipu Sahib, as they were pronounced and known in North America. There were no states, so these names were no strangers to Americans. They came here through race horses imported from England in 1770s, and in fact, a foal born in America was named Hyder Ali in 1777, and many more were named after that. Now, 23-year-old Lieutenant Joshua Barney, who had just joined the U.S. Navy, arrived in Philadelphia and was honored with the command of Hyder Ali, the ship. Assigned with recruiting men, Barney used a poem penned by Philip Morin Freneau to attract young American men to the ship. The poem exalted Hyder Ali's bravery against the British, and soon Barney led a force of 110 men. And on April 8, 1782, Barney led Hyder Ali to a victory over General Monk, a much bigger ship, a much larger ship belonging to the British. Now, Philadelphia burst in celebrations. Ballads were made upon this brilliant victory and sung through the streets of the city. And echoing with the name of Barney was that of Hyder Ali. Now let's move on and see how Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan's battles influenced America's freedom negotiations. Now, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. So these are among the most important figures that helped form USA and shaped its destiny in infancy. These are its founding fathers. In 2010, the National Archives collaborated with the University of Virginia to host historical documents related to the founders of USA on a website. Now, the correspondence and intelligence gathering of America's founding fathers, which can be found on this website, reveal that they not only keenly followed the wars that were fought in East Indies, as India and its neighboring countries, particularly the islands, were known then, but they actually looked forward to victories of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan over the British, so that they could use those victories as a tool to negotiate with the British for their own independence. There are numerous letters and correspondences that name Hyder Ali or refer to the fate of British in India during the rule of either Tipu Sultan or Hyder Ali. Particularly, there are many battles with the British. I'm selecting a few. I'm quoting a few here to help you understand the impact these two men had on America's path towards its freedom from the British. The earliest formal introduction of an Indian ruler to America's founding father seems to be a letter in French to Benjamin Franklin by Comte de Tressan. He was the Lieutenant General of the armies of France. Now, in one of his many letters to Franklin, he wrote from Paris on June 24th, 1777, about a European who served under Hyder Ali. In another letter, Comte de Tressan called Hyder a brave a brave Mughal prince, unquote, and offered to put the U.S. Congress to quote into an intimate correspondence with the European who was working for Hyder Ali. Now, as mentioned earlier, the Second Anglo-Mysore War was keenly followed by American revolutionaries. John Adams, in his letter to the President of Congress on June 10, 1780, provided the U.S. Congress with details of the movement of British Admiral Hugh's squadron, and he referred to Hyder Ali as quote, the famous Hyder Ali. And this letter was read in the U.S. Congress on 25th on September 25th, 1780. Now, through 1781, the revolutionaries corresponded on the about the Anglo-Mysore War that was going on in India, in East Indies, as it was known then. So the revolutionaries, they hoped and wished for England's defeat, and a gentleman called as Edward Jennings wrote a detailed account of Hyder's campaign to John Adams on April 4, 1781 from Brussels. Now he mentioned the receipt of a London-based newspaper that included information about Hyder Ali's army of 80,000 horses and his siege of Arcot. Now it narrated the rout of Colonel Bailey and Colonel Fletcher, together with the loss of 400 Europeans and 4,000 Indian sepoys, as well as Hyder Ali's territorial gains and the narrow escape of Colonel Monroe to Madras. Now, John Quincy Adams, who became America's sixth president in 1825, he wrote a diary as a child. And at 13, he wrote to his mom, Abigail Adams, from Leyden on April 8, 1781, about Hyder Ali's victories. And he mentioned the death of Colonel Fletcher and the capture of Colonel Bailey. On August 28, 1781, the Rhode Island delegates wrote from Philadelphia to William Greene, the governor of Rhode Island, in which they expressed their happiness at the suffering of British in India. And as negotiations for recognition of an independent USA continued, the concessions to Americans oscillated with the military fortunes of the British and its chief opponents in India, which are the French, Hyder Ali and his son Tipu. Now, in a letter dated June 13, 1782, John Adams wrote to Benjamin Franklin from The Hague and wished to communicate with the enemies of the English. And then on June 25, 1782, James Madison wrote to a gentleman, Edmund Randolph, from Philadelphia, and discussed the issues that affected America's independence. And these included Hyder Ali regaining an upper hand over veteran Englishmen, Ayr Coote, in the battlefield. Now, John Adams wrote to John Jay on August 13, 1782, from The Hague about the Fitzherbert's Commission. Now, this was constituted in the United States of America. But this commission was authorized to work with the four powers, quote, that were at war with Great Britain. But Adams was not very sure if one of these referred to Hyder Ali or the Marathas, who also were in conflict with the British around the same time. Now, in late September 1782, peace negotiations were on in Paris, and in his letter, John Adams wrote to Robert R. Livingston on September 23rd, 1782, from The Hague, on how the Americans looked for good news from India and elsewhere on an hourly basis, at a stage in negotiations where they were greatly optimistic. Now, on December 24, 1782, the Virginia delegates wrote to Benjamin Harrison from Philadelphia, and they said that they had received a report that the French, with Hyder Ali's help, had actually captured Madras, though they did not have an official confirmation of it. Now, a treaty was formally signed between Britain and USA on 3rd September 1783. Now, this treaty effectively ended the war, and British recognized America's independence and its boundaries. This treaty was ratified by the U.S. Congress on 14th January 1784. In the same year, separate treaties were signed by the warring European nations, ceasing all mutual hostilities. Now, what happens was France, which was the main European ally of Tipu, ceased all its mutual hostilities. So France, when France did this, it did not inform Tipu about it, and Tipu was obviously upset about it. Now, what what this led to was Britain could now focus completely on its affairs in India, and Tipu had no option but to make peace with the British, despite having an upper hand in his ongoing battles with the British. In fact, he had laid siege on the port of Mangalore, and according to British sources, they were about to be defeated when this news came in, and Tipu had to sign the Treaty of Mangalore. Well, now to conclude, the world today is it's considered a global village thanks to the availability of means for people to travel and communicate between nations. But it may surprise us that even in 18th century, seemingly local political events and humans made an impact on lands and societies far away from where they lived. Now, Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan gave many a lesson in military and political strategies to European colonial powers like England and France. Now, their bravery and political strategies echoed across the proverbial seven seas in distant North America for many decades. Not only did this shape the views of America's founding fathers of India during the nation's formative years, it also encouraged them in their own struggle to found this great nation called as the United States of America. Thank you.